So the take home from today is, where's Laura there? Copy Moonee Valley. There we go. Thank you, Moonee Valley. There we go. It's going on the CV apparently. You'll see it on LinkedIn in 10 minutes. Put your climate emergency declaration on the front page of your website, just like you have your First Nations one. Put it, below or something. Build a permanent menu link for climate emergency, and we know how to do this in the last 48 seconds. Because we've done it for COVID, right? We did emergency communication for coastal. Every council, to some degree, in Australia did emergency. Find that person who did it and say, please do this again, but change the words to climate emergency, right? There were funding announcements, infographics, permanent bars at the top of the website, their own major heading called, menu item COVID, et cetera, et cetera. So we've done it before, we can do it again. And I think this is the one thing that is being done worse by all councils. We're doing lots of cool programs. Many, many councils are doing many good programs, but it doesn't matter if we don't frame it in the emergency and the response that we need to avoid the sort of stuff that Sprat was talking about earlier, right? It's that simple. And I think it's our next move to success.
If you are a leader, what we need from you is to speak up. And what we've seen from research done, particularly by Behavioural Insights divisions in the UK, is that politicians and trusted organisations supporting climate solutions is absolutely essential for social proof and the mass behaviour change that we need across the country in order to properly tackle this problem. What we're not seeing from governments is the message of urgency. Of course, we've talked about a climate emergency, which helps with that, but anything you can do to boost that is wonderful. Councils have been leading on this, but we really do need federal and state governments to step up. So anything you can do to pressure them to do the social licence work, to do the emissions reductions work, and communications and reduce demand for polluting products is absolutely essential. One other thing I suggest is to ignore the deniers. Don't try and change their minds. They're only 10% of the population. Overwhelmingly, the population knows about climate change, cares about climate change, but is either disengaged or doesn't know what to do about it. So talk to them, get them to change their behaviour. There's worse things than being called woke. Let's move on.
So the first thing I think you need to do is ask questions. Whatever forum you're at, whether it's in the council chamber, at the ALGA National Conference, at the MAV, at community forums, where state and federal MPs are at, ask questions of decision makers and let them know that it's an issue that you and your community care about, and that collectively we want action from those people. It's important to join the dots. As you heard earlier, in 2022, Maribyrnong was impacted by the floods, and we had about 500 people who lost their homes as a result. And it was talked about as not as a climate-related disaster, but as a natural disaster. And again, here language matters. And while we don't want to add any additional anxiety to the people affected, using specific language opens up a conversation about climate, perhaps for a later date, but it also puts what happened in a climate context.
So coming to the gloom and doom debate, sigh. I wrote this booklet like years and years ago, and still it goes on. I was distressed to hear that it was going on back in 2006 already. What the research shows, this is from a meta-analysis of 98 studies, is that the best way to move people to action is a personally relevant threat. If it's paired with an action that has any chance whatsoever of actually being efficacious. And no, it doesn't backfire. This is another meta-analysis, 127 studies. It doesn't backfire. That's why we see public health campaigns that nearly always use that formula, threat plus the action to take. And it would be ridiculous to have an emergency message for a fire or a flood where you didn't use exactly that formula. The fire is coming, get out now. So how did we come to believe something different? It's partly some studies that just get repeated over and over, and I'm so running out of time. Fear won't do it is one. Terrible methodology, tiny numbers, and the findings actually were misreported. It's gone all over the world. It's still getting referred to, including by the IPCC from 2011 to 2016, recommending it. Similarly with this terrible study, no, it doesn't backfire. This is, again, small numbers, university students doing it for credit as part of their course. Terrible design, and it doesn't even show what people think that it shows.
About a lack of information, a lack of knowledge of systems in Australia, and confusion about the support available. We also heard differing expectations of and confusion about various roles of government, council, state, federal, different departments within governments and community agencies in a disaster. And we heard, next please, thanks. We also heard about how beliefs and expectations from people's home countries affected their expectations of climate change here and the actions and behaviour they took in an emergency. And it's crucial to consider this when speaking with communities about extreme weather in their local setting here. So in short, culturally effective communication should be in language whenever needed, facilitated and supported by bicultural staff. It should take into account that some communities have cause to distrust government and agencies, and it should acknowledge that many lack familiarity with Australian systems. It should also acknowledge that we have lots to learn from culturally diverse communities and their strengths and knowledge in managing climate. So as I said, it's strong communities that are resilient communities and ones that know best how to mitigate and adapt to climate change in their local setting. There are many things councils and others can do to achieve this. So workforce diversity, having women and multicultural staff in key community roles as well as in leadership, working with community leaders as information intermediaries, and proactively seeking the experience and expertise of women in all our diversity about our lives and the way climate change affects our lives.